Hello YouTubers, Joe Kersey here on Wednesday, October 22nd, 2014 at 12:30 in the afternoon Eastern Daylight Time. Now I'm showing you a picture here of the Berlin Wall shortly, it was in 1989, just before it was getting ready to fall, and a year before the reunification of East and West Germany. This was in today's Daily Telegraph. And it was an interesting coincidence which I will explain later. But this was 25 years ago here, coming up on 25 years ago here. And this event moved me profoundly, and I'll tell you why. In 1971, my friend and I went over, we spent a month in England, and then we traveled around Western Europe for a month. But we did go to Berlin, and we did spend one afternoon in East Berlin. Now, to get to Berlin, obviously at that time, you had to take a train excuse me, through East Germany into West Berlin, and it was an overnight train. And we left from Nuremberg. And as I said, it was an overnight train, and we slept actually on the floor, sort of out in the corridor. But periodically the train would stop, and you'd have these East German police. Actually, they looked more like military than police. Come through, and they'd kick you awake. They'd just kick you right in the side, kick you awake, demand to see your papers and all that, and check things, rifle through your stuff. But we made it into West Berlin, and little island of freedom. Believe you me, which, Berlin's a great city. I mean, I understand it's even better now than it was, but, I ideally want to go back. But we did, on Sunday, we did go through Checkpoint Charlie into East Berlin, and much to my dismay, you had to hand your passport through this slot and you don't know what you're going to get back or not. Plus they shook you down for 5 West German marks, 5 Deutschmarks, 5 Deutschmarks, which was hard currency. That was a source of hard currency for them. Because the East German mark wasn't worth too damn much. You certainly couldn't use it in the West. So they shook you down for that. At that time, that was let's see. It was maybe just about $1.25 US. Which today would be, probably about $10, $11, $12. Kind of like what the English charge you to go into a cathedral now. Actually, I think sometimes they charge a little bit more. But that's not going into a prison camp. Which essentially, East Berlin was essentially a very large open prison camp. Now the people were out in in one of the squares, and with their families. It was Sunday, and they knew, they could tell we were from the West, and the look of just, couldn't tell it was resentment. Obviously, none of them would talk with us. We didn't try to initiate any conversations either, because I wanted to get back to freedom, and just the atmosphere was so oppressive. And of course, it was very different on the east side than the west. I mean, because, the west, you had all these shops and things, and, bustle and people moving around being free and doing their own thing. And over there, it's like, plus at that time, this was in 1971, and there were still a lot of areas that had not been rebuilt after the bombing during the war. And certainly the western edge of the eastern part of the city was one of those. And we walked around. We saw some of the, still bombed out sites. And I will say there was one thing we saw that was relatively moving, and that was what amounted to East Germany's tomb of, what would be the equivalent of their tomb of the unknown soldier. And it was in a sort of a very modest size sort of, well, I won't call it wasn't like a Greek temple, it wasn't one of these things with high columns, but it had an eternal flame, and it had, the guards, like we have at Arlington, walking in front of the tomb. This was not an elaborate tomb. It was a very simple tomb. And these guys fought for either what they believed in or what they were made to fight for, and they died. So you have to respect that. Anyway, we got back to West Germany, and I was very delighted to get back to West Germany. And then we took the train back. Then I think we took the train back Monday night. Well, no, we took the train back during the day, and boy, I'll tell you, as far as I was concerned, the communists, the Soviets, got the best part of Germany in terms of the rich farmland and everything. Beautiful. And we didn't go back. We took the next, there were three routes, and we took the central route back, which if we'd stayed on it would have taken us all the way to Frankfurt. But we got off the train right after we got off across the border, and I think it was called town Bibra, and we of course immediately went into a bar, and it was a bar that was basically catered to the railroad workers, and they told us they were railroad workers, but they wouldn't have needed to, because a lot of them had missing parts of their fingers, from sticking them down in there where they were working near the couplings. One guy even had a fresh bandage on his stump. But they would not let us buy a single beer when they found out we were Americans. And that's also was very moving. So I'll tell you, when I sat here in front of the TV, in 1989 and watched all this stuff, the wall, people sitting on the wall like I showed you, and then tearing down the wall, and I'd sit here at night and squall, just squall. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. The fact that the Cold War was such a constant feature growing up. So this leads into the second part of this little video is that I ran across this book the other day, about 2 weeks ago, and I got it. It actually arrived yesterday, and I blew right through this. This is a good read. Living Abroad with Uncle Sam, Foreign Service Days by Helen Weinland. Well, I have a bit of a vested interest here because Helen Weinland, as for those of you who watch some of my other videos, she was one of my history instructors at Ohio State in 1970. Well, in 1970, and then also I had a course with her. I think it was in 72, I think, fall of 72. It might have been spring of 71. In any case, had 2 courses with her. She was excellent, excellent instructor, and just a thoroughly decent, kind, fun human being. And actually, I got to know her fairly well socially, as a student. And then when I started in the medical school, I actually lived in her apartment building briefly before I found a much cheaper place, much closer to the medical school. And she eventually left Columbus in April of 1973 to eventually go on the career path that took her spend 20 years in the Foreign Service, which is what this book was about. In fact, late November, she and another history instructor and my parents had lunch at my apartment, when I was in medical school. On the occasion of the Michigan game, I think I addressed that too in another video. But in any case, this is a very good book, and it was very interesting. She was basically, she was in Switzerland as her initial posting, and then she was in Nigeria, and then she, did some Czech language training, and then went to Czechoslovakia, and then she ended up in Berlin. And then she ended up as a final assignment as consul general at a post in Nigeria again. Interspersed with this, she had periods of duty in Washington, D.C. at the actual, Secretary of State's Department of State. And this is an excellent account. It's by First Books Library out of Bloomington, Indiana. First Books Library out of Bloomington, Indiana, and you can find it on Amazon. That's where I found it. I encourage you all to get that. Excellently written. Well worth your time. And it's fun when you know the author, because even from 30 years ago, over 30 years ago. No, hell, gosh, no. Good Lord. Over 40 years ago now, I guess. But, I mean, because if you read this aloud, when I read this, I like to read stuff aloud to myself. I guess I'm very 16th century and earlier in that regard. I mean, it's exactly like she taught. And some of the, and a lot of the enthusiasms that she clearly had then, come through in this book. It's great. So that's going to be it for today, YouTubers. So bye-bye, YouTubers.